The sun had long set over the dusty plains of Arizona, and the stars above twinkled like distant lanterns hung by an unseen hand. The air was cool, carried with the faint scent of sagebrush mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil from a recent storm. In the distance, the silhouette of a lone rider could be seen against the dark horizon, his figure silhouetted by the faint glow of moonlight filtering through scattered clouds. His horse moved slowly, its hooves stirring up small puffs of dust that lingered in the stillness of the night. As the rider approached the old wooden fence surrounding the Johnson family ranch, something about him seemed off. His posture was stiff, almost rigid, as if every movement caused him pain. His hat sat low on his brow, casting shadows over his face. But even from this distance, one could make out the streaks of red staining his shirt and trousers. Blood, fresh blood, dripped from his boots onto the dry ground beneath him. Yet despite the gore coating his clothes, there was no sign of injury on him. No cuts, no wounds. Nothing suggests he himself had been harmed. It wasn't his blood. The gate creaked open under the weight of his hand as he dismounted, his movements deliberate yet labored. He staggered slightly before regaining his balance, his eyes scanning the quiet ranch. The barn stood silent, its doors closed tightly. Chickens roost peacefully in their coop, unaware of the man who now walked among them. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once, then fell silent again, perhaps sensing the unease carried by the stranger, or perhaps not so much a stranger at all. He paused outside the main house, his hand resting briefly on the hilt of the revolver holstered at his side. For a moment, he hesitated, looking down at his blood-soaked hands. Then, with a deep breath, he knocked sharply on the weathered wooden door. Inside, Mary Johnson stirred awake, her heart pounding as she heard the sound. It was late, too late for visitors, and though the ranch wasn't exactly in the safest part of the territory, they hadn't had trouble in years. Still, caution dictated that she remain wary. She pulled a shawl around her shoulders and lit an oil lamp, its soft golden light casting long shadows across the room. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "It's me, Ma," came the reply, rough and gravelly, barely recognizable. Her breath caught in her throat. "Tommy?" she whispered, disbelief coloring her tone. Little did she know, the answer would unravel more questions than it resolved. Thomas Johnson, the rancher's son, had left home nearly 2 years ago, chasing dreams of adventure and glory far beyond the confines of the family land. Letters had trickled back in the beginning, filled with tales of bustling towns, thrilling gunfights, and camaraderie among fellow drifters. But those letters stopped coming months ago, leaving only silence in their wake. Many assumed the worst, that Tommy had met the same fate as countless others who ventured too far into the lawless lands of the West. Yet here he stood, alive but undeniably changed. Mary opened the door cautiously, her hand gripping the frame tightly. When she saw him, her knees nearly buckled. There was no mistaking the boyish grin etched into his features, even now marred by exhaustion and sorrow. But it was the blood covering him that made her gasp aloud. "Oh, Tommy," she murmured, tears welling in her eyes. "What happened?" He shook his head, refusing to meet her gaze. "Not tonight, Ma. Just let me come inside." And so she did. She ushered him into the warmth of the house, lighting another lamp to chase away the shadows. Her husband, John, emerged from the adjoining bedroom, his face groggy with sleep until he laid eyes on their son. Then recognition dawned, followed swiftly by shock. "Tommy!" John exclaimed, stepping forward. "By God, we thought you were dead." Tommy managed a weak smile. "Close enough, Pa." But the reunion was short-lived. As Mary fetched water and rags to clean him, Tommy remained uncharacteristically quiet, lost in thought. His parents exchanged worried glances, knowing full well that whatever lay behind the bloodstains on his clothing could not be good. When finally clean, save for the stubborn stain that refused to fade entirely, Tommy sat slumped in a chair by the fire. The flames danced merrily, throwing flickering patterns against the walls, but they brought little comfort to the young man. After what felt like an eternity, John spoke up. "Son, you need to tell us what happened." Tommy looked up, his blue eyes haunted. "You won't believe me." "We have to try." Mary said softly, sitting beside him and placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Whatever it is, we're here for you." With a heavy sigh, Tommy began his tale. It started in a town called Blackwater, a place notorious for its saloons, gambling dens, and cutthroats willing to sell their souls for a handful of gold coins. Tommy had arrived there seeking work, hoping to earn enough money to send back home, while also proving himself capable of surviving in the harsh world outside the ranch. At first, things went well. He found employment as a stable hand, earning honest wages and making friends among the other laborers. Life, for a time, seemed manageable. But then came the night everything changed. A stranger rode into town, clad in black leather, and riding a stallion so magnificent it drew stares wherever it went. This man introduced himself simply as Mr. Grayson, though few believed such a name belonged to someone so menacing. Within days, whispers spread throughout Blackwater. Grayson was no ordinary traveler. He was a bounty hunter, feared for his ruthlessness and precision, and he was after someone or something in the town. Curiosity got the better of Tommy, as it often did. One evening, after finishing his shift at the stables, he decided to follow Grayson, eager to learn more about the mysterious figure everyone talked about. What he discovered shocked him to his core. Grayson wasn't hunting men or outlaws. He was hunting women, specifically Native American women who had fled their tribes to seek refuge in Blackwater. These women worked in laundries, kitchens, and occasionally brothels, trying to carve out lives for themselves amidst the chaos of the frontier. But Grayson saw them as targets, prizes to be captured and sold to the highest bidder, regardless of their wishes or humanity. Enraged by what he witnessed, Tommy confronted Grayson one fateful night. The confrontation turned violent almost immediately, bullets flying as both men scrambled for cover behind overturned barrels and crates. By the end of the fight, Grayson lay dead, his lifeless body sprawled in the dirt. But victory came at a cost. Several of the women Grayson had intended to capture were injured during the struggle, some critically. Tommy stayed with them, nursing them back to health as best he could. They trusted him, not because he was white, but because he chose to stand against injustice when others wouldn't. Over time, they shared stories of their lives, their struggles, and their hopes for the future. Through them, Tommy learned truths about the West that textbooks and tall tales never taught. Yet danger lurked closer than any of them realized. Word of Grayson's death reached powerful forces who sought vengeance, not just for the fallen bounty hunter, but for the disruption of their lucrative trade. Bounty hunters, slave traders, and corrupt officials converged on Blackwater, determined to reclaim what they considered theirs. Fearing for the safety of the women, Tommy helped them escape, guiding them through treacherous terrain towards sanctuary deeper within tribal lands. Along the way, they encountered resistance, ambushes, betrayals, and harrowing close calls. Each step forward brought new challenges, testing Tommy's resolve and courage. Yet through it all, he vowed to protect them, even if it meant sacrificing himself. Until, that is, the final betrayal. One of the group, a young woman named Ayanna, whom Tommy had grown especially close to, revealed a secret buried deep within her past. She wasn't merely fleeing persecution. She carried knowledge of a hidden treasure map coveted by many ruthless men. The map detailed locations of ancient artifacts rumored to possess great power, treasures worth killing for. Little did Tommy know his involvement with Ayanna and the others marked him as a target. Those pursuing them cared little for justice or mercy. They wanted the map, and they would stop at nothing to get it. Back at the ranch, Tommy's story hung heavy in the air. His parents listened in stunned silence, absorbing the weight of his experiences. When he finished, John leaned forward, his expression grim. "So they think you have the map?" Tommy nodded. "They'll come looking for me. And when they do, they'll find us instead," Mary finished, her voice trembling. Determined to protect their son, John and Mary devised a plan. They hid Tommy deep within the hills surrounding the ranch, using false trails and decoys to mislead anyone tracking him. Meanwhile, they prepared the ranch for whatever might come, reinforcing fences, stockpiling supplies, and arming themselves for battle. Days passed without incident, each sunrise bringing renewed hope that the threat had passed. But deep down they knew better. The men hunting Tommy were relentless, and sooner or later they would arrive. And when they did, the ranch erupted into chaos. Gunshots echoed through the valley as riders charged toward the property, their faces obscured by bandanas and malice. John and Mary fought valiantly, defending their home with every ounce of strength they possessed. Inside the house, Tommy watched helplessly, torn between staying hidden and rushing to aid his parents. Then, just as it seemed all was lost, a miracle occurred. From the woods emerged a familiar figure. Ayanna, leading a group of warriors from her tribe. Together, they launched a counterattack, overwhelming the attackers and driving them back. The battle raged fiercely, but ultimately, the tide turned in favor of the defenders. When the dust settled, Ayanna approached Tommy, her expression solemn. "We couldn't leave you to face this alone," she said quietly. Relief washed over him, followed quickly by guilt. "You shouldn't have risked yourselves for me." She smiled gently. Sometimes risks are worth taking. In the aftermath, peace returned to ranch, but not without scars. The events of that night left indelible marks on everyone involved, reminders of the darkness lurking just beyond the horizon. Yet amid the ruins, there was also hope. Hope that love and courage could triumph over fear and greed. Hope that the bonds formed in adversity could endure anything. And as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Tommy stood beside his parents and Ayanna, ready to face whatever the future held. For in the Wild West, survival wasn't just about luck. It was about standing together, no matter the odds. The morning after the battle brought with it a heavy stillness, the kind that settles over a place once the storm has passed, but before the rebuilding begins. The air was thick with the scent of burnt gunpowder and scorched earth, mingling with the faint aroma of sagebrush that clung stubbornly to the land. Birds chirped hesitantly from their perches in the nearby trees, as if testing whether it was safe to resume their songs. The sun rose higher, its golden rays casting long shadows across the ranch, illuminating the scars left by the night's violence. Tommy stood at the edge of the property, his hands resting on the wooden fence that had been partially torn down during the fight. His mind raced, replaying every moment of the previous night in vivid detail. The sight of his father reloading his rifle while shouting commands, the sound of his mother's voice steady despite the chaos, the flash of steel as Ayanna and her warriors charged into battle, it all felt surreal, like some grand tale spun by a wandering storyteller around a campfire. But the ache in his muscles and the weight of exhaustion pressing on his shoulders reminded him that this was no story. It was real, and it was his life now. Behind him, the house bore its own marks of the struggle. Windows were shattered, doors splintered, and the porch railing hung precariously from one side. Inside, Mary swept up broken glass and scattered debris, her movements deliberate but slow, as though each sweep of the broom carried the weight of everything they had endured. John leaned against the wall near the fireplace, his face lined with fatigue, but his eyes sharp, scanning the horizon for any sign of further trouble. They both looked older, worn down not just by the physical toll of the fight, but by the emotional burden of knowing their son, and now their home, had become targets. Ayanna approached Tommy cautiously, her boots crunching softly against the dry ground. She wore her usual attire, practical yet adorned with intricate beadwork that spoke of her heritage. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, framing her face, which bore an expression somewhere between concern and determination. "You're quiet," she said, stopping beside him. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, as though she feared disturbing the fragile peace that lingered in the air. Tommy glanced at her briefly before returning his gaze to the distant hills. "There's a lot to think about." She nodded, understanding without needing more explanation. "You don't have to do this alone," she offered gently. "None of us do." He sighed, running a hand through his unruly hair. "I didn't ask for any of this, to bring danger to my family or involve you and your people. If I'd known what I was getting into when I followed Grayson that night." "But you did follow him," Ayanna interrupted firmly, cutting off his self-recrimination. "And because of that, those women are free. Because of you, they aren't slaves anymore. That's something worth standing for." Her words struck a chord within him, resonating deep in his chest. He wanted to believe her, to accept that his actions had been justified, even noble. But guilt gnawed at him, whispering doubts about whether he'd done enough, or perhaps too much. Still, he muttered, it doesn't change the fact that these men will keep coming. As long as they think I have the map, we're never safe. And what if you don't? She countered, tilting her head slightly. What if the map is gone, buried somewhere far away from here? Tommy froze, turning to look at her fully now. What do you mean? Ayanna hesitated, her lips parting as though she debated whether to speak further. Finally, she exhaled sharply. Before we left Blackwater, I took precautions. The map, it wasn't entirely real. Or rather, it wasn't complete. Some parts were forged, others destroyed. Only fragments remain, scattered across different locations. No single person knows the whole truth. His brow furrowed in confusion. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I wasn't sure how far they would go, she admitted, her voice tinged with regret. If they found out the map was fake, or incomplete, they might have stopped looking altogether. Instead, they doubled down, believing you held the key to everything. And now, she trailed off, gesturing vaguely toward the damaged ranch. Now we pay the price. For a moment, Tommy struggled to process what she'd revealed. The thought that the entire ordeal, the bloodshed, the fear, the sacrifices, might have been based on nothing more than a fabrication left him reeling. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, tempered only by the knowledge that Ayanna had acted out of necessity, not malice. Why didn't you destroy it completely? He asked finally, his tone low and measured. I couldn't, she replied honestly. Not without risking retaliation against my people. The men who sought the map, they wouldn't stop until they believed it was truly gone. By keeping pieces hidden, I gave them hope and gave us time. Time, Tommy thought bitterly. Time hadn't been enough to prevent the destruction of his home or the strain placed on his family. Yet part of him understood her reasoning. In the Wild West, survival often depended on deception, on playing the game better than your opponent. Ayanna had played hers masterfully, even if the cost had been higher than anticipated. As they stood there, lost in thought, the sound of approaching hoofbeats broke the silence. Both turned instinctively, reaching for weapons that weren't immediately accessible. From the tree-line emerged a small group of riders, their faces obscured by dust kicked up by their horses. For a heartbeat, tension coiled tightly in Tommy's chest, preparing him for another fight. But then he recognized the familiar silhouette of Sheriff Carter, flanked by two deputies. Carter slowed his horse as he neared, tipping his hat respectfully. Morning, Mr. Johnson. Miss Ayanna. His voice carried authority, but also warmth, a rare combination in these parts. We heard reports of trouble out here last night. Thought we'd best investigate. Tommy exchanged a glance with Ayanna before stepping forward. You could say that he began, choosing his words carefully. But maybe it's better if you hear the whole story first. Sheriff Carter dismounted, tying his reins to a nearby post. Lead the way, then. My boys, and I can lend a hand cleaning up while you talk. Grateful for the offer, Tommy led the lawman toward the house, where John and Mary waited anxiously. Over the next hour, he recounted the events leading up to the attack, careful to omit certain details, like the existence of the map itself. Carter listened intently, nodding occasionally, his expression thoughtful. When Tommy finished, the sheriff stroked his chin thoughtfully. Well, son, sounds like you've got yourself quite the reputation now. Folks be talking about this for miles around. But don't worry. We'll make sure word gets out that you're not someone to mess with. Sometimes that's half the battle. It was a small comfort, but one Tommy appreciated nonetheless. With the help of the sheriff and his deputies, repairs began almost immediately. Boards were nailed back into place, windows boarded up temporarily, and fences mended as best they could. Through it all, Tommy worked alongside everyone, finding solace in the physical labor. Each swing of the hammer or pull of the rope felt like a step toward reclaiming normalcy, however fleeting it might be. By late afternoon, the worst of the damage had been addressed. Exhaustion settled over the group like a blanket, but there was a sense of accomplishment in the air, a shared pride in having survived and fought back. As the sun dipped below the horizon once more, painting the sky in fiery hues, Tommy joined Ayanna on the porch, watching the stars begin to twinkle above. "You know," she said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence between them, "your parents are remarkable people. They remind me of my own family. Strong, resilient, willing to stand against anything to protect what matters most." Tommy smiled faintly, glancing at the house where his parents sat together, sipping tea and sharing quiet conversation. "Yeah, they are. I guess I never fully appreciated how much until now." "And you," Ayanna continued, turning to face him directly, "you're not just a rancher's son anymore, Tommy. You're someone who fights for what's right, even when it costs you dearly. That takes courage." He shook his head, dismissing her praise. Courage isn't always about being fearless. Sometimes it's about doing what needs to be done anyway. She regarded him thoughtfully, her gaze piercing. "Then maybe it's time you started believing in yourself the way others believe in you." Her words lingered in the air long after she spoke, sinking deep into Tommy's heart. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to consider the possibility, not just that he'd done the right thing, but that he was capable of continuing to do so. The road ahead would undoubtedly hold more challenges, more dangers, and perhaps more secrets waiting to be uncovered. But with his family by his side and allies like Ayanna and Sheriff Carter supporting him, Tommy felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Hope that he could carve out a place for himself in this untamed world, a place where justice outweighed greed, where courage triumphed over fear, and where love endured against all odds. The days that followed the attack brought a strange rhythm to the ranch, one that wove together moments of quiet reflection with bursts of frantic activity. Repairs continued steadily, though progress was slow due to the limited resources available in such a remote area. John and Mary worked tirelessly alongside their son, each finding solace in familiar tasks of rebuilding what had been broken. The sheriff returned periodically, bringing supplies and updates from neighboring towns, his presence offering both practical assistance and a sense of security. Ayanna remained at the ranch for several more days, her decision to stay motivated by a mix of gratitude and pragmatism. She understood that the danger posed by Grayson's former associates hadn't vanished entirely. They might regroup, return, and attempt to finish what they'd started. Until then, her people and she herself would stand watch over the Johnsons, ensuring no harm came to them again. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, Tommy found himself alone on the porch, staring out at the horizon. The world seemed quieter now, almost peaceful, but he knew better than to let his guard down completely. Somewhere out there, someone still believed he held the answers to a mystery far greater than he ever imagined. And while Ayanna's revelation about the map's incompleteness offered some relief, it also raised new questions. Questions that gnawed at him relentlessly. "Thinking hard, I see." Tommy turned to the sound of his father's voice, surprised to find John approaching with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He accepted one gratefully, savoring the warmth it provided against the cooling night air. "Just try and make sense of it all," he admitted, cradling the mug in his hands. "There's so much I don't understand yet." John settled into a nearby chair, his weathered face illuminated softly by the fading light. "Life out here has always been about figuring things out as you go along. You can't plan for everything, especially not in this part of the country. But you got something most folks don't, a good heart and a strong mind. That'll take you far." Tommy smiled faintly, touched by his father's words, but unsure if they fully applied to his current situation. "It feels like more than just figuring things out, Pa. It feels like being caught in something bigger than me." John agreed, his tone thoughtful. "And maybe that's how it is sometimes. Some men spend their whole lives searching for meaning, while others stumble into it without even realizing it. You're one of those who stumbled right into the middle of it all." They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds coming from the occasional chirp of crickets or the distant rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. Eventually, John spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of years spent navigating complexities of the Wild West. "You know, when your ma and I first came to this land, we didn't have much. Just a dream and enough stubbornness to keep going when times got tough. We built this place brick by brick, fence by fence, knowing full well that every day could bring its own set of challenges. But through it all, we learned one thing, that family comes first. Always." Tommy nodded, understanding the underlying message. That's why you fought last night. Why you're still fighting now. John chuckled dryly. Fighting isn't always about guns and fists, boy. Sometimes it's about making choices, hard ones, that protect what matters most. And right now, what matters most is keeping you safe. No matter how far those bastards think they can push us, we won't back down. His words struck a chord within Tommy, reinforcing the lessons he'd already begun to internalize. Survival in the Wild West wasn't just about strength or skill. It was about resilience, about standing firm even when the odds seemed insurmountable. His parents had shown him that countless times, and now it was his turn to embody the same principles. As the stars began to emerge, dotting the vast expanse of the night sky, Tommy felt a shift within himself, a subtle but significant change in perspective. For so long, he'd viewed himself as merely the rancher's son, defined by the expectations placed upon him by tradition and circumstance. But the events of the past few weeks had revealed another side of him, one capable of courage, sacrifice, and determination. It was a side he was only beginning to embrace, but one that promised to shape the man he would become. The following morning dawned clear and crisp, the kind that made the air feel alive with possibility. Tommy rose early, drawn instinctively to the barn where he often sought solitude amidst the comforting presence of animals. As he entered, the soft nickering of horses greeted him, their warm breath fogging slightly in the cool air. He paused to run a hand along the neck of an old mare named Daisy, her coat gleaming despite the hardship she'd endured alongside the family. While tending to the livestock, Tommy noticed movement near the edge of the property. Squinting against the rising sun, he identified Ayanna standing among the trees, her silhouette framed by the golden light filtering through the branches. Curious, he approached her cautiously, mindful of the unspoken tension that lingered between them since her revelation about the map. "Morning," he said simply, stopping a respectful distance away. She turned to face him, her expression calm but guarded. "Good morning, Tommy. Did you sleep well?" "As well as can be expected," he replied honestly. "You?" "I haven't slept much lately," she admitted, glancing briefly toward the horizon. "Too many thoughts keep me awake." He nodded sympathetically, recognizing the sentiment. "I know the feeling." For a moment, neither spoke, content to let the silence stretch between them. Then, Ayanna broke it with a question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. "Do you blame me," she asked quietly, her eyes meeting his directly, "for not telling you everything sooner? For putting your family and mine in danger because of my decisions?" Tommy hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "At first, yeah, I did. I thought maybe you'd endangered us all for nothing more than a lie. But now," he trailed off, shaking his head slightly. "Now, I realize it wasn't just a lie. It was a strategy, a way to buy time, to give hope where there seemed to be none. And even if it cost us dearly, it saved others." Her gaze softened, gratitude flickering in her dark eyes. "Thank you for understanding. Not everyone would." "But does that mean it's over?" he pressed, leaning forward slightly. "Or are there still pieces of the puzzle waiting to be uncovered? More dangers lurking in the shadows?" Ayanna sighed, her shoulders drooping ever so slightly. "I wish I could say yes, that it's truly finished. But the truth is, I don't know. The men who seek the map, they won't stop easily. They believe too strongly in its power, in the wealth and influence it promises. Even if they discover it's incomplete, they may continue hunting for fragments, hoping to piece together whatever remains." Tommy absorbed her words, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. "Then we need to stay vigilant," he said firmly, "not just for ourselves, but for anyone else who might get caught up in this." She nodded solemnly. "Agreed. Together, we'll find a way to end this once and for all." With renewed purpose, Tommy returned to the house, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Though uncertainty loomed large, he carried with him the knowledge that he wasn't alone, that his family, Ayanna, and Sheriff Carter stood beside him, united in their resolve to protect what mattered most. In the Wild West, survival was never guaranteed, but with courage and determination, perhaps even the darkest storms could be weathered.